It was somewhere in the 1970s, almost lost in the hazes of history, when I worked in the engineering department of a manufacturing company. And part of my job was liaison with finance, amongst other things. And the CFO gave me the unofficial title of the kid in engineering, even though I don't think I was a kid. But anyway, I spent a couple of months or better researching machines and some capital equipment to add to our manufacturing processes. And I laid out the entire thing about how we would use the machines and what they would do, how they would cut out the aluminum and so on, and save a lot of money. And I, gave the discounted cash flow and the return on investment and all the typical stuff that you would do. And I was tapped to make the presentation to senior executives of the Fortune 50 company that owned us. And there I was, the kid in engineering, dressed in my company's uniform of slacks and a polo shirt, and facing three grumpy old white guys with dark gray suits, white shirts, and power ties. And I'm about to explain capital equipment expenditures to them. Hi, this is Gary on manufacturing. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, for quite some time now, and I appreciate the support of inductive automation. Discover a whole new view with Ignition 8.1 by inductive automation. It's packed with features for the modern control system like unlimited licensing, high-powered tags, and a mobile-first flexible design environment for all devices. Ignition 8.1 supports enterprises of any size. By the way, version 8.1.16 has just been announced and is out, and with a number of new features. And you can check inductiveautomation.com. You can also check themanufacturingconnection.com and get my brief write-up on some of the changes that we're happening. Thank you to inductive automation. So I had this all laid out, and this is prior to PowerPoints and all that kind of crap, but I had documents and drawings and financial worksheets and all that kind of stuff. And I stood there and I passed it all out. I explained everything to these guys. They looked at me and said, "Your company is losing $500,000 a month. Why should we put any money into your company?" I had no answer. That was way above my pay grade. I reported to a VP who reported to the president, who reported to one of those guys. And so I just had to kind of look like, well, sorry, can't answer that question, and let's move on. What started me thinking about this whole thing was listening to a Seth Godin podcast, akimbo.link, and he takes questions at the end or during the week, and then answers the best questions during his podcast. By the way, we could do that too. If you sent me a question, I'd be glad to tackle it and answer it. But anyway, an IT person wrote to Seth and said, "We have security weaknesses in our IT system, and I go to management and ask for probably lots of money to increase and beef up the security of our IT system. And they don't do it. They don't give me all the money I ask for. I don't understand why, because it's very important." And Seth talked about how corporate boards and top executives are looking into risk and what's the risk of something happening to us and what it would cost us, say a ransomware. Okay, if a ransomware is $1 million and it costs $10 million to put in a system, maybe we just pay the $1 million. Maybe the risk is not worth the risk. The rewards of putting something in isn't worth it. The risk is less. And anyway, so I was thinking, well, that's an exactly right answer from an executive standpoint, but there's another standpoint to look at it too. And I relate this to safety. And you might say, safety what? But I remember when we first started to have to add safeties to machines. At the time, I was with a company that designed and built automated assembly equipment, and the big automotive companies started to tell us that we needed gates and switches that would trigger if a gate was open, so the machine would shut, and all kinds of safety things like that. And I'll never forget one of the first ones we shipped to an automotive plant, and I went in for some reason. I think we had run it off and gotten paid, but we were still in like a warranty period. And I went in with a tech, and we were going to troubleshoot some problem that happened with it. And the first thing I noticed was all the gates had been removed from, and the fences and all that kind of stuff had all been removed from the machine and were stacked against the wall close by. And none of the safeties were being used. And for years, I would go into a plant, years later, like 10 years later, I'm selling automation equipment and doing some installation and so on. And I'd go into a plant, and all the control cabinet doors were wide open, 600 volts inside, and sometimes even more, I'm sure, but typically 600 volts in a control cabinet, motor starters and things like that, click clacking and all kinds of stuff. And the doors were just like wide open. The safeties were disabled. You take a little screwdriver, you turn a little thing on the Hoffman enclosure, and you can open it without having to flip the disconnect switch and point you're in. And so safety, but people were getting hurt, and there were all kinds of hazards of problems. Sometimes management didn't seem to care because of the risk reward thing and all that. And engineers would go and say, well, if we spend $1 million and add more safety to the equipment, and they'd say, well, not using it anyway. So what? And then engineers, somewhere along the line, I'm not sure who the first one was and the first ones I ran into, but they asked the question, what if? What if is a great question, by the way. You should ask what if more often. I should ask what if more often. But anyway, what if we built a safety end instead of adding it on at the end and making it a pain in the butt for the operators and maintenance people that are working on that? What if we designed the system with safety in mind in the first place? And it's the same with discrete manufacturing and some sort of machine like I was working with at the time, or processes and building in safeties more and more in our process system. I've talked to safety instrumented systems people for many years and so on, and it's the same concept, a lot different technology, but it's the same idea. What if we built in this stuff ahead of time? And it's just part of the cost, but actually it can reduce the cost of the machine. It can reduce the overall operating cost as well. We make a more robust and a more stable and a more actually user-friendly machine or process. So we think ahead of time, we built it in, and there we go. And I'm thinking security is similar but different. In security, but let's think about it. So we want to add on security to a system we already have. Okay, yeah, we need security. What are some of the big major problems we have with security? It's not so much getting hacked from the outside, somebody like just coming in. It's Joe or Sarah or whoever who click on a link they shouldn't have clicked on, who load, I think we've done away with USB drives. No, not enough. Sticking in a USB drive that's infected. By the way, I can remember the early 1990s when my competitor PLC manufacturer sent some update floppy disks. Remember those? And the engineers at that automotive plant that was my major customer loaded those disks and infected all their computers and everything they had. And that goes way back very close to 30 years ago. Same problem. Anyway, people, systems, procedures, those are all problems. But once again, we've looked at firewalls and air gaps and all kinds of things in the networks and so on. If we built all this in and planned it ahead of time, would it be more robust, and could we make it more user-friendly and make it such that the system works a little better without having people having to hack in and so on, or leave it wide open for the maintenance person or the contractor who comes in overnight to fix a processor or update a processor, fix a machine, and that sort of thing. Same kind of idea, different technology, different people involved, but it's the same thing about thinking ahead. What if we designed this ahead of time with security in mind, as well as safety in mind? And that brings me up to one last thing I'm thinking about in all this. So there was just and I'm not going to mention any names, but because it happens to every automation supplier, a big security vulnerability was uncovered and announced, and it was a major company, and it was a major hackable flaw. Whether it's ever hacked or not, who knows? What's the risk of it? I don't know. I'm not a specialist in that, but it exists. That flaw exists, and it's a kind of a backdoor that hackers could get in, and so somebody put it in LinkedIn, which is fair game. It was a public announcement. I mean, I put it on my blog, and it's fair game for publicity, and actually probably should be if you've got one of those things, and you didn't catch the announcement from the supplier. Well, now you know, and you could call the supplier. But what got me was that a manager of that company that was in part of the subject of that announcement replied or commented on the LinkedIn post and said, well, what I'm really more concerned about is, Joe, the maintenance person, or Sarah, or Kareem, or whoever it might be, who brings in an unauthorized USB stick or clicks on a link, or all those things that we actually know exist. But I thought, no, that's an inappropriate comment. That's not the problem there. Yes, that is another thing, but the thing that has to be addressed is this particular thing with this equipment that needs to be updated and fixed, and something sent out to all the customers and so on. So be careful what you say about all this. Be careful where the problem is, and get the immediate problem. And you have to solve that immediate problem, and don't say, well, what, it could have been something else. Well, no. It wasn't something else. It was this, and this needs to be fixed. So if you're going to comment publicly on social media, it pays to think. And I get sometimes on Facebook, somebody will say something is just totally wrong, and I have this great urge to even type it out and answer, no, this is what's right. And I'll go, no, don't send it out on social media. Don't even get involved in all that. So anyway, I thought about that comment by that manager with the company. Like, no, we just need to address this one thing, and that's fine. And we all know we need better procedures and enforcement of procedures and so on to help with our security problems. But that's another issue. But anyway, security, we do need to think about it, and it is important. Right after Russia invaded the Ukraine, my service that secures my website reported a big spike on hits from Russia. Now, I don't think I was being hacked, but I don't know, and I'm glad I pay X numbers of dollars a month to protect my website. But things happen, and we do need to pay for these and buy these different kinds of protections and so on for security. Security is important, and we need to all be aware of not clicking links and that sort of thing. Lots of stuff, but pay attention to some of these other things. Some of the stuff was designed in a different age, and now we're in a new age where people are hacking in. So yeah, take care, make yourself secure. Make your home automation secure, make your factory automation secure, make your process automation secure, keep yourself secure. Anyway, Gary Minshall, Carry On Manufacturing. We're talking security today. What the heck? And another thank you to Inductive Automation for being the longtime sponsor of this podcast and my blog. And remember, Ignition 8.1.16 has now been released. And if you're an Ignition customer, make sure you pick up the release and download it, and so on. And thank you to Inductive Automation. You can go to inductiveautomation.com. And one final announcement, this is a pro bono ad that I'm running for ARC Advisory Group. They have moved the annual ARC industry forum from February to June, and you can click on the link on my blog, or you can go to arcweb.com and register for this event. It's always a big event. It's kind of it's kind of a user group for ARC advisory group, but on the other hand, you see so many people there, and you can make so many contacts and catch up on old friends and so on. So check that all out. And I'm starting to get a lot of announcements about in-person meetings, and pass those along as I get them. But things are starting to pick back up again, and keep yourself safe, but don't be afraid to go out anymore. And maybe you can hit one of these forums. This is Gary on Manufacturing. Thanks for listening.